welcome to another episode of Liberated Panda with my co-host Jason and me, Angel, where we discuss the latest topic, trends, and events of the week. This week, Jason and I plan to discuss the fallout from Trump's second impeachment, what happened at the end of Trump's impeachment trial, who voted to convict, who didn't, and why. Then we'll introduce the still unfolding $2.7 billion defamation lawsuit on the horizon by Smartmatic and Dominion voting systems versus Fox News, Rudy Giuliani, and others. What is a defamation lawsuit, and can Smartmatic and Dominion voting systems pass the very high bar required to win a defamation lawsuit? We don't know, but we'll discuss later on in this show right here. But first, let's talk about the other news gripping the nation this week. For many of us living in certain parts of America, it's been a rough week. Winter Storm Uri was a major coast-to-coast storm that spread snowfall and damaged ice from the northwest into the south, leaving millions without power. While many of the country are used to seeing snow, some parts of the country that aren't equipped to handle snow are grappling with how to manage the aftermath of the snowstorm. Jason, would you like to share with our viewers what's going on with this historic and unprecedented winter storm that has slammed the South and Midwest, considering that you live in Texas? And more specifically, do you want to share with our viewers how this snowstorm is impacting you and your community in Texas?
Well, it's a little cold down here, Angel. We're getting a little bit of snow too. Both those things are not something we normally see. Unlike a lot of places in the U.S., Texas really doesn't get a lot of snow. The last major snowstorm we had, where I live here in the DFW Metroplex, was at the beginning of February 2011. Typically, North Texas has ice storms, although we've been pretty good the last 5-6 years, but not normally accompanied with a lot of snow. So what's unique about the winters here is that the temperatures go up and down. We could have what's called all 4 seasons in 1 week, where you have highs of 70s some days where you're outside drinking a beer at an outside beer garden, and then 2 days later it's a high of like 35 and it feels like winter. So Texas has those weeks like that once or twice every winter typically, but they're not really accompanied by a lot of snow or ice. One interesting thing about this storm is that last week it was really cold here. It was below freezing for a number of days. When that happens, our ground freezes. Up in the Northeast, the ground stays pretty cold all the whole winter. So when you get snow, it typically lays on the ground. Here, any snow that we get will melt within a couple of hours normally. It really doesn't have a chance to set. So when you take last week's colder than normal temperatures for a sustained amount of time, coupled with the snow and other precipitation this week, and then on top of that, to add insult to injuries, these temperatures dipped even further into the single digits. I mean, the real feel outside was they were saying below zero, which is absurd in Texas. We never see that. And what that does, it causes obviously a lot of issues that are unforeseen. It does freeze the ground more, but it also freezes our pipes. It creates some very odd ice sculptures, if you want to call it that. And just some different animals altogether. People's pools are frozen solid. Pipes are burst kind of everywhere. We're having to leave our faucets drip at night. It's kind of a mess here. And a lot of it's just the combination of the snow and the ice, and also the very, very long sustained frozen temperatures. But unlike a lot of the states in the north, like I said, we're not built to handle winters like this. We're not built to handle storms like this, and our infrastructure just really can't take it. We're much more adept at handling 110, 120 degree heat than we are at 5 degrees cold. So we don't have any snow plows down here. You never see a plow in Texas. Normally, I know up north in New York, they have all the sanitation trucks. They stick the plows on the front. A lot of other states have their own trucks, we don't get that here. They don't salt the roads. They kind of put a little bit down on the highways, but they don't do anything really to melt it. And our pipes aren't really winterized and prepared for those low temperatures. And we're just not built in a manner to really have sustained low temperatures. And that really moves forward even through to our power grid. A lot of people have heard about how Texas is on their own power grid this week. That's something a lot of people down here have always kind of joked about, because Texas has a secessionist nature. And that was, Texas oil, natural gas. That was always a thing, right? Texas on its own power grid. See you, U.S., whatever.
So,
um,
so you mean like Texas is from like it's a separate power grid from
altogether.
all the Western states, right?
No,
Like,
all the whole country. So in the US you have three power grids. You have the East Coast power grid, which I believe, I'm not sure where it ends, but I think it goes past the Mississippi, I think even into Kansas. And then you have the West Coast power grid, and then you have Texas. Texas is on its own grid. The Texas grid doesn't even take up the whole state, though. There's parts of East Texas that's not on the Texas grid. El Paso in the far western part of the state is hooked up to the western US grid just because it's kind of isolated a little bit. But Texas has its own power grid. A lot of that goes back to about 50 years ago when federal regulation got a little bit heavier and they wanted to regulate the power grids. Texas said, you know what? We don't want to deal with your regulation. No thanks. We can produce our own power. And, Texas is big on energy. Obviously, we have pretty much every type of energy flourishes here with our climate and with our just our whole ecosystem. Uh, so right now, we typically peak in the summertime in terms of energy usage. Like I said, we're much more adept to 110, 120-degree weather. And so our ACs are blaring 24/7 to cool everything down. Right now, though, we're experiencing unprecedented surges in electricity needs this time of year. Normally, they'll have the plants offline for maintenance over the winter time, give them a rest and stuff, compared to the summer when everything's maxed out. But now they don't have that. You have plants down that now we need the power back and we don't have it. Um, they say right now we have just a whole host of failures. Some of our generation, like our wind turbines, we've recently increased from about 10% of wind energy to almost up to 30% in the last decade, I believe, or so. A lot of those turbines are frozen. The
right.
ironic thing is that they're using petroleum-based lubricants to heat them up. But a portion of those are frozen. Not all of them. They're getting a bad rep right now, to be perfectly fair, from a lot of conservatives. Not all of them are frozen, and the ones that aren't frozen are actually spinning at record pace. This storm we always have a lot of wind down here. This storm has been accompanied with a lot of wind. So that's a huge plus there. They're actually the ones that are working are.
That's interesting. Going back to the wind turbines thing, do you
Mhm.
think it'll make more Texans like pro um like green energy?
I think it could. You always see more solar panels popping up here because our summers are pretty intense, right? We get a lot of
Mhm.
sunlight. We're closer to the equator than most of the United States. So I think that will we see more renewables? We could see more, but are we going to winterize our turbines? A lot of oil goes into making the turbines, right? It's not all green when it comes to that. But I do think wind does have a place, maybe not 30% of our electricity, but a portion of it. Also, a lot of the natural gas in the pipes, natural gas contains water, so a lot of that's frozen in the slush, so they really can't use it. And one of our four nuclear power plants in the state is actually offline due to a safety sensor failure from freezing temperatures. So you can see we're about 30% down from our power supply right now, which is a recipe for disaster.
So, we haven't experienced a lot of difficulties in New York, as Jason mentioned, because we're up in the north and we're way more equipped to deal with winter snowstorms. Um, so I think a lot of us in, the north are kind of watching with amusement because we always get hit by snowstorms. But the fact that you guys have power outages and people dying, that's not as amusing. So what I do find interesting, though, and we could quickly just kind of go through it so we can get to like Trump's impeachment and the Smartmatic lawsuit, are like some of these like ice formations that you mentioned that as a result of the snowstorm that we haven't seen ever really. And the best example can be seen in Michigan near the Great Lakes. I went to law school in Michigan for 3 years, and I've never seen anything like these ice pancakes. Can we pull up a picture on the screen of these ice pancakes? They're like these like round little like discs. And Jason, have you heard of these ice pancakes too?
I have. They are. I think they get them from when the water's spinning. I heard, um, and it's just constantly moving, so it's causing the ice to form on top. I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, and there's also like these ice jams that occur, and we had pictures of them before too, where like the ice kind of like it floods over uh the roads, and it like forms like these like crashing waves that kind of freeze um like mid crash, and that's like built, that's creating a lot of like issues in Texas as well. I mean, in Michigan and other places. So if
Yeah.
we can pull up a picture of that, that would be cool for our viewers to see. We certainly don't see much of that in Europe where I live. Um, so that's pretty much everything on the weather front. Let's move on to the Trump impeachment.
Can't escape that guy, right?
Right. So, Jason, well, I'm just going to walk us through the conclusion of Trump's second impeachment for inciting the January 6th riots at the Capitol. And as everyone predicted, or as at least what we predicted here, as early as 4 months ago, Trump was acquitted in his second impeachment trial. What we didn't know was how many Republican senators would vote to acquit Trump. So let's look at the 7 Republican senators that voted to convict Trump. There's Richard Burr of North Carolina, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Mitt Romney of Utah, Ben Sasse of Nebraska, and Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania. So the 2 surprise Republican senators who voted to convict Trump are Bill Cassidy of Louisiana and Richard Burr of North Carolina. So those were the 2 unexpected votes. And I also thought that the House managers presented a very graphic case that these riots were far more serious than we initially thought. So public opinion might be swayed. For instance, reports show that 140,000 Republicans in 25 states where they actually had the data, they left the Republican Party in January compared to the 79,000 Democrats that left in January. So Republicans that left the party in January, a lot of them cited the Capitol riots as a reason for leaving the GOP. And experts are saying that this is an unprecedented departure. In addition, the vote was historic. The 7 Republican senators voting to convict Trump makes this impeachment trial the most bipartisan vote ever. So that says something too.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting, right? Because we had 6 Republican senators who said that they voted that it was legal, right, out of 50. So 44, or no, 5, sorry, 5, that it was a legal trial beforehand. So 45 voted it wasn't a legal trial, and then 2 of those flipped to say that they convicted him, even though they didn't believe it was a legal trial. So it looks like they put that belief on the back burner to give to well, for whatever reason they chose, what they chose. It looks like they put that belief on the back burner in order to acquit. Could you maybe give us an explanation why a Republican senator might believe he was responsible, but still, vote to acquit necessarily?
Yes, and I think this is the thing that frustrates people the most, lay people that like maybe don't understand like a lot of law or aren't following that closely. Many of the Republican senators, they claimed, like Rubio said this, Mitch McConnell was saying this, a lot of them claimed that the House managers made a very compelling case, but they decided not to vote to convict Trump despite what they thought was compelling evidence, the contrary, due to a mere technicality. So the technicality, Jason briefly touched upon this, that many Republicans relied upon, and I kind of think it was like their get out of jail card, was that they didn't believe that the impeachment trial was constitutional. So they didn't have, so the Senate didn't have the right to, vote to convict because there was no jurisdiction. So they won't even consider, this is what they're arguing, they won't even consider any facts presented in the trial, no matter how compelling, because they're saying there's no jurisdiction, so none of it matters, which is complete like legal gibberish, because like in a regular, if they're following like court rules, and this is an impeachment trial, so they shouldn't be following court rules, like in a court, if there's a motion to dismiss a case based on lack of jurisdiction, then that's it. The trial doesn't go on. There's nothing else. Like they end and everyone goes home. But here they voted and they have the majority vote that there was jurisdiction. So it makes no sense to me how the Republicans can argue that, like, in good faith, but oh well, they did. For for, some of us are wondering, hey, is Mitch McConnell going to come and save us? Is he going to vote to convict and bring along with him enough Republican votes? To nobody's surprise, no, he didn't. He did not vote to convict Trump. What did surprise me, however, was Mitch McConnell coming out and saying there's no question that Trump is practically and morally responsible for the January 6th riots, and the rioters were acting on Trump's orders. So McConnell and even Trump's defense attorney, they both suggest that Trump can be held accountable outside of the impeachment trials. So that's something I will be keeping a close eye out. I'll be reporting back on, all the lawsuits that stem out of, the possible possible criminal investigations and criminal claims that, the government has against Trump for these riots and more in the weeks following.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's especially interesting too. Just what could come from it, all the additional lawsuits, possibly from riots, where we already saw a lawsuit filed, in fact, by a Democratic House member against Trump and I believe Rudy Giuliani for incitement. So we'll have to see where that goes. I personally think, looking at the whole impeachment trial, I thought you made a very valid point originally, how compelling the case the first 2 days for the House managers were. I think Friday, though, the first 10 minutes or so, when his defense pulled up that they were doctoring tweets, changing years to try to link tweets with incitement, they gave somebody a blue check mark that doesn't have it to make it sound like she had authority. I mean, once you do that, I got to be honest with you, I'm surprised so many senators voted to convict. I thought that really didn't. I thought that, if they had a really good case, they wouldn't be reaching by doing stuff like that. And I think that brings in a lot of question marks moving forward. These same people who did this, what else will they try to doctor in the future? They say they have such a clean argument, but obviously it wasn't so clean and easy. But I think one other point is that what really comes out of this is it's interesting to see Mitch McConnell. His wife was one of the longest lasting members of the Trump cabinet, right? He votes that he doesn't believe that there's not jurisdiction for this impeachment, right? Which there is. There's plenty of reasons why they can do it, right? But he doesn't believe it, so he voted to acquit based on that. But then he comes out saying that Trump is morally responsible for the riots, which is interesting. He's made a lot of various statements back and forth on other things, really putting himself in the middle. And he's one person. Everybody hates Mitch McConnell, right? Nobody loves him any from either side.
But he's like a political mastermind. So kudos to him for that, I guess.
He is an absolute political animal. He's one of those guys out there, and I know what's going through his head right now. He's thinking, Joe Biden's the president. They have the Senate. They have the House. I'm at my most comfortable when I am just about at 50-50 in the Senate. Either I'm 51 or I'm 49. This is where I can work my magic to stall legislation and extract my pound of flesh. And that's exactly what he does. You saw that with the COVID relief, right? He said that, we're not going to pass that. Everybody's mad at Mitch McConnell, but he's using that as a bargaining chip later. So Mitch McConnell's an animal. He just is what it is. Everybody's mad at him for a different reason or another, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Right. So again, we can keep talking about Trump forever, and Mitch McConnell for that matter, and all the Republicans that are supporting or not supporting Trump, and all I guess the infighting, for the Republican soul right now. And we can definitely talk about that in future episodes. But right now, we want to kind of segue into the other topic that we wanted to touch upon that's in the news, which is the Smartmatic and Dominion lawsuits. So let's see. Let me briefly introduce this topic because it's still a developing story. So basically, Smartmatic and Dominion, they're competing voting system company. Who are they suing? What are they suing for? And how much? I can get to that. So who are they suing? So Smartmatic, well, first of all, what is Smartmatic? Smartmatic is a London-based company, and they are on the plaintiff side of this whole lawsuit. They are hired to accurately process votes, keep them secure, and facilitate audits. Smartmatic is completely separate from its competitor Dominion, which I'm sure you've also heard about in the news. Dominion is a Toronto-based company that sells electronic voting hardware and software, including voting machines and tabulators for use in the US and Canadian elections. So both Smartmatic and Dominion are suing for defamation in separate lawsuits. Defamation, for those of you that don't know, the legal definition is a false statement or a lie that actually causes you harm in one way or another. So, for example, if someone posted on social media that you were having an affair, even if you were completely innocent, and your spouse decided to file for divorce as a result of that, you have a defamation case. There's two types of defamation cases, libel and slander. So libel is written and slander is said out loud. That's the only difference. So to win a defamation case, you need to prove three things: false statement, intent to harm, and damages. So basically, false statement is someone said or wrote something about you that was false. The intent to harm is the person who said or wrote the false statement about you did so with the intention of causing you harm. And then the third is damages, which is, did the statement in fact cause you harm or damages? Damages in legalese, or like a legal language, means like money, basically, either like money or like it affected your, like, I don't know, emotions or something like that. But emotional lawsuits almost like never win. So we'll just stick to like money damages, really. So now to the meat of the lawsuit. Smartmatic is suing Fox News and its anchors, Lou Dobbs, Maria Bartiromo, Janine Pirro, as well as lawyers Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell. In Smartmatic's 276-page lawsuit filed with the New York Supreme Court, it alleges that Mr. Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, created a story about Smartmatic, and that Fox joined the conspiracy to defame and disparage Smartmatic and its election technology and software. Recently, I believe February 4th, Fox News has filed a motion to dismiss under freedom of speech defense, among others, which could work. They filed, I believe Fox News won the defamation case against Tucker Carlson, because they were saying that Tucker Carlson is so unbelievable that no reasonable person can, this is what the court said, that no reasonable person can believe Tucker Carlson. Hence, he did not defame them. So that doesn't speak very well to Tucker Carlson, in my opinion.
I don't think that's true. Don't you think they're just trying to get out of the lawsuit?
That's what the court said. That hey, like they won, right? They won on those grounds. I don't think that is going to carry over because you can't say that about like Lou Dobbs, for instance. He was their highest rated show. And for those of you that don't, exactly. For those of you that don't know, Fox Business is their highest rated show, and Lou Dobbs is the anchor, and he's been there forever. And I watch it every day on a daily basis. And I remember during the election, Lou Dobbs would say stuff like, just in the middle of like talking about financial analysis, he would just like sprinkle in random like statements about how Smartmatic and Dominion, were like colluding to like, undermine the electoral process. And he would just like sprinkle that in. So I think it's very different because he operates in like the news segment versus Tucker Carlson, who operates in the opinion section. So I think this lawsuit has a much stronger like case than the one against Tucker Carlson. Then there's there's two sides to the story in terms of how the public is receiving it. On the one hand, you have people who are saying this is great, there needs to be a check against the right-wing media. And then on the other hand, you have people saying, well, is this an infringement on free speech? And is this a slippery slope kind of situation? I don't think it is, but we'll see. So yeah, Jason?
I think it's interesting though when you look at who they're actually suing. Lou Dobbs, I think honestly he's on the time slot. I think the gears a little bit more towards opinion, but he does have a lot a lot of factual base for some of what he says. Maria Bartiromo is very factual. I'm kind of surprised that she's in the suit, to be honest. Judge Janine Pirro, she's all opinion. And then obviously Trump's lawyers, Rudy and Sidney Powell. But I think what's interesting, you said that you needed three things to win a defamation suit, right? False statement, intent to harm, and damages. So we know that Dominion and Smartmatic are probably going to lose contracts, right? So there's damages there. We know that they're, in their opinion, these were false statements. So we have a false statement there. So I guess the argument really kind of is we're in the intent to harm, because when you look at it, if the elections were stolen, because they do have some evidence that's valid, right? Those votes in Michigan from Antrim County were changed. There was an error, so now that's one thing they're going to argue in court. They're saying, look at all the weird voting swings in the middle of the night. Now they have to argue that in court too. So now you come to the intent to harm. So my question is, how do you feel that in a case like this, securing our election is more important than any intent to harm? There's not an intent to harm the company, but there is an intent to make sure that our elections are valid and secure. And I think that's kind of where the suit might fall flat.
I disagree. I think that Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell and Fox, they wanted to find a scapegoat, and they found their scapegoat in Dominion and Smartmatic. I agree with you that like the opinion people maybe they should still be responsible for what they say though, but maybe less so. But like when you have, like, for instance, Lou Dobbs, right? They laid him off, or they fired him, or they took him off the air.
Yeah, he was let go.
He was let go, and it was such a shock and surprise to everybody that even the person that like came to replace him didn't know what was happening, and he didn't even know what was happening. And people are kind of guessing as to whether the Smartmatic lawsuit had to do with his departure, involuntary departure. So
it probably did.
Right, and
it's hard to believe it doesn't, right?
Right. I mean, the timing is just so coincidental. And I think that's Fox News saying to itself, or their legal team saying, hey, we think, we want to show good faith in, firing Lou Dobbs. And, maybe you won't find us guilty, and we won't owe like $2.7 billion, because let's face it, Fox News has the deepest pockets. So even if they do find Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and everyone else guilty, it's Fox News that's going to have to pay, because they have the most amount of money. So I think they have the most amount to lose. So I think they're taking the right precautions in protecting themselves. So and those actions make me believe that they are genuinely fearful of this lawsuit. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think they should be fearful of it. I mean, the number's daunting. One could make an argument whether or not it's just there as intimidation. But it's a big number.
They always come up with a big number, but it's not so
which makes me
big.
think intimidation. It's not right? It's not 10 billion.
Normal. Right. But it's normal. Like in a regular lawsuit, right? Like they'll say, hey, I'm going to sue you for $1 million, and then actually only recover 50,000. But but you can only get up to what you ask for. So that's probably why they put the 2 points up.
At this point, though, you have to look at all Dominion and Smartmatic's contracts, not just here. They have contracts everywhere. They were doing the Venezuelan elections. They did Mexico in '88. I know that. So a lot of these companies, they do a lot of elections. So it's not just here. So there's a lot of potential contract loss there for those defamation claims. So 2.7 billion, I mean, you're like, man, Fox is really getting hit. But when you look at it from their perspective, you could make an argument that their company's just trash now, and so let's just end Fox, because Fox viewership has tanked. Conservatives don't want to watch Fox anymore. All the shows have gone down. Even Tucker's gone down, and he's the one. Him and Hannity are the two that are staying pretty steady. So it kind of is what it is. This will put Fox in the dumps. And honestly, with Rupert Murdoch aging and his son's not really into running Fox News as a conservative bastion of politics anymore, or at least, center right, honestly, Fox News is pretty much done if they lose this suit. They're fighting for their life right now.
Okay. Well, too bad we don't have more time to discuss this. I think it's really interesting. But like we said, this story is still unfolding, and there's so much more to this that we'll talk about it next week, and we'll go more in depth into it. Before we go, I want to answer two of the questions that our viewers left us. One of the questions was Texas snowstorm ? So I'm guessing that means, like, is it really weird to have a Texas snowstorm?
It is. So over the last decade or so, we haven't gotten much ice. We haven't gotten much snow. Last snowstorm happened in 10 years, 2011, February 3rd and 4th. There got a few inches. The year before that, something like a foot or two was dumped down here.
So not much.
Yeah, there was a lot. Well, I mean, for here, it's a lot. So we do get snow here. They were even getting snow down to the Rio Grande on the border. So San Antonio's full of snow right now. They don't even know what to do. Austin's getting ice storms today. Those ice storms are moving east to Louisiana. The whole state has been covered in snow. When you look at the map, literally all white, just everywhere. So it is, yes, Texas gets snow. Not a lot. But, honestly, a week from now, I could be out on the patio drinking a beer in 70-degree weather. So, yeehaw, that's Texas.
Right. And then the final question that we have is, and I don't even know if we know enough to answer this. It says, didn't we talk about the power outages in mainland China with the same caliber of the Charmin media? And is the tone the same? So there's like mass outages reported in cities in China, but I don't know much about that. I just know that this was like in America, this was an unprecedented storm, but I have no idea what's going on in China.
I know. So in the U.S., a lot of our outages, California has rolling outages. It's another thing we didn't get a chance to talk about now. A lot of times to conserve power, we'll have what's called rolling outages. So you'll go on for an hour where you have electricity and then off for another hour, and you'll kind of roll like that. It just allows you to heat your house and then kind of move power somewhere else that's needed so somebody else can heat their house too. It's a way to conserve energy. California does that a lot to prevent forest fires, so they can turn some of the grid down and they're not pushing as much electricity. That's most of the time you see the rolling outages in California. I know Brazil has a lot of them because they have struggles with electricity. I've heard of China having a bunch. I'm not super familiar with it.
We can look into it.
Yeah.
We can look.
Was that due to a natural event, or was that planned, like rolling?
No, it was. I think it was. I'm like reading about it right now.
I heard it was a natural event.
Okay, well, there you go. I mean, I only see
weather or something.
Yeah, I only see one article about it, so I don't know. So
we'll research that. It's an interesting.
But anyways, I mean,
I know what you're getting at.
But we're out of time. We're out of time for today. So we'll be following this story, and we plan to report back next week. But that's the end of our show for today. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave in the comment section. We'll be happy to answer next time or in the comments.
Thank you for the question.
And thank you for the questions and our Twitter. And please join us next week here on Second Gen's Liberated Panda. And keep warm, everybody.
Yeah, Bye. Stay warm. Bye, guys.